Wait, what? I can do that? This is Eric Bell with Wait, what? Financial matters that matter for business and the people that own them. Welcome to this episode of Wait, What? Financial matters that matter for business and the people that own them. Last episode, we were talking to Dr. Denice Hinden. This is her part 2. Denice, we left off talking about the debrief, so let's pick it up there. So you did the meeting, the first meeting, you debriefed after that meeting. Do you circle back a year later or see did they accomplish what they wanted to, or 6 months later, whatever?
Yes. So we do that as well. We'll check back, 6 months to a year. We stay in touch. And, we very often find that they're well on their way to doing, what they said. Or if they're not, if they're running, into some challenges, we can step back in and help them again.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about brain chemistry. This was something that we talked about. How does brain chemistry positively impact the arc of trust in a business, bottom line, or make people more trustful? Can you talk about brain chemistry? First, define that for me.
It's one of my favorite questions. So I'll take what you said first. How does brain chemistry influence a business? Brain chemistry is all about what happens in our brain, and then it comes out in the way we have conversations.
Okay.
And since everything that businesses do, nearly everything happens in a conversation, the way we have conversations influences what happens in the business. So if I could ask you a question, think for a minute about a really frustrating conversation that you had with maybe one of your clients or, colleague. And just kind of get a picture of that frustrating conversation in your mind. What made it frustrating?
For me, it was lack of execution.
Can you say a little more?
Well, yeah, they were assigned to do a certain task within a specific time frame and just plain didn't get it done.
Okay.
So, for me, when I say I'm going to get something done in a specific time frame, I'm a stickler about that. But they did not do their piece, so that was frustrating to me.
Okay. Yeah. So what happens is, just from a brain chemistry perspective, there's this sense of, in your mind, in your head, there's a little bit of blame, right? You are blaming them for not getting something done.
Correct.
And literally in 0.07 seconds, they tell you they didn't get something done and you get frustrated. Your amygdala, which is the primitive part of our brain as humans, our amygdala gets hijacked. And that hijack means that it starts getting emotional, And so when we feel really emotional, our endocrine system starts releasing the neurotransmitter cortisol. And cortisol exacerbates the frustration and anger. And it actually starts shutting down our brain. And so if we get really frustrated, we can have like a fire hose of cortisol rushing through our brain. It cuts off access to our prefrontal cortex, which is in our forehead, the forehead part of our brain, where our creativity, our rationale lies. So when we're feeling really emotional, negatively emotional, we don't have access to our best thinking. It doesn't mean that we're not going to think well. Sometimes cortisol actually helps us think well and adrenaline, another neurotransmitter, help us think well in an emergency, and we can act well. But if you're on that emotional ride all the time as a business owner, you're not actually getting the opportunity to make full capacity of your full brain. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, think about a time when you had a really great conversation with a client. What made the conversation feel great?
Well, it was flowing easy. Seemed like we had been friends forever, even though we just met. Had a lot in common. I think we had the same values, basically. That's kind of what put us together.
Okay. So it felt like there was a real connection.
Correct.
A real, like a bonding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another neurotransmitter that starts flowing when we have that kind of connective experience. Mm-hmm. It's called oxytocin. And it was first discovered in pregnant women, bonding with their unborn child. But we now know that oxytocin exists in every human, men and women alike, and it flows when we feel safe and connected and trusting with whoever we're with. And so when you made that connection with that colleague, your oxytocin started flowing in your brain and their brain, and it opens up our neurochemistry and gives us access to our prefrontal cortex.
I'll never forget, I was going to a meeting in San Diego, this is years ago, and the woman who was the receptionist, she was the director of first impressions. That was her title right there. And when I saw that, it just it made me smile, but it also, you could feel the energy in the room and in that reception area. It was kind of she was a director of first impressions. It made the rest of the meeting that much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the opportunity that we have in businesses is to actually create spaces where oxytocin is flowing, and to actually teaching leaders how to be aware when they're, frustrated, when they feel that frustration happening, to actually shut it down and cut off the cortisol and actually allow the oxytocin to flow.
Back to the guy that had his arms folded, the librarian guy.
Yes.
I mean, he definitely had he had no oxytocin within his system.
Right.
Someone like that, they may not be a fit for organization, or was he having a bad day? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I love that question, Eric. So here's the thing. When I facilitated that meeting, I was really early on in my career. I was not yet a coach. I didn't have the training that I have now. If I had that meeting to do all over again, I would have actually become really compassionate and caring with that person. Mm-hmm. And I would have explored with him, like, what was making him so frustrated right in that moment, and I would have asked him if he would be willing to set the frustration aside, because he had so much to contribute to the meeting. Like, I knew that as a seasoned librarian, he could have contributed a lot to the meeting, and just appealed to his sense of who he was as a person to invite him into the conversation, So that meeting was many, many, many years ago. But now I understand that we can shift our brain chemistry and help people feel valued and trusted, and it can change the whole dynamic of a meeting so quickly.
I got to say, too, I've been in some newer business developments where there's a lot of millennials. Very loose. Everybody seems to be having fun. Different environment than what I grew up, where you wore a suit and tie and everybody had a cubicle or an office or a desk. I mean, what's going on with the millennials in terms of their brain chemistry?
So they like connection. They're a generation of leaders, young people who grew up with a sense of being connected to each other and working in teams. And they like that. They like to play off of each other. And they also, I think, have a lot of experience in their life. Like, they had the opportunity as young people to experience a lot of different things. They travel a lot. They participate in really creative things in their school environments. They volunteered a lot growing up. And so they have a lot of experience. So a way to bring them into a conversation is to appeal to their experience, and to help them use their experience in a way that benefits everybody, like to invite them in to do that. And, I just find that when you give them the floor and you invite them to give perspective, they have a lot to share. And if we value that, we engage them.
When you say they like to be engaged and involved, it seems like a lot of it's through electronic communication. I'll never forget, I was watching a football game with my son, and he's texting on his phone. I said, "We watching the game or what?" He goes, "I'm texting my girlfriend." I said, "Why don't you just call her?" He goes, "It's easier this way." So it seems like through electronic communication or, the internet anyway, that's an easier way for them to communicate versus face to face. And the reason I say that is because a lot of them, I don't see them as leaders. I see them as more team players, like you were saying, where there's a collective team of leaders, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to describe it. And at the same time, I like to expand the definition of leadership to be how we influence ourselves and others to positive, productive action. So when I find, a young person who really is interested in making a difference in the organization or the business that they're in, that signals to me that they have some interest in being a leader, stepping out a little bit. And so, we can help them do that by giving them the tools to learn how to facilitate meetings, for example, or learn how to run group discussions, in a way that engages other people, and help them set down the electronics and actually create those face-to-face or even virtual discussions. Because I do a lot of meeting facilitation now in the virtual space. And I find I work with a global network of business coaches, the World Business Executive Coaching Summit, WBEX, and all of their the people that work for WBEX, they're all millennials. And they're literally all over the world, and we work in a virtual space, and they're great facilitators too. So I think it's just really looking for the right talent, and those folks that are interested in learning these kinds of skills and nurturing it in them.
I don't mean to throw my son under the bus anymore, but I got to tell you this story too. When we first moved here, he was on a basketball team. They came in dead last. They got the same size trophy as the people that came in first place. So it was like everybody gets a trophy. Or when I was growing up, you had first, second, third place. If you were below that, you didn't get anything. And there was a distinct difference between first place trophy and the third place trophy. And then the next year comes around, his team's in first place. They got the same trophy they got when they were in last place. So it seems like it's hard for millennials to, I've noticed when I'm having a conversation, this is with my son, of course, and it turns bad, all of a sudden he can just flip. It kind of like triggers him because he's not winning. He's not getting a participation trophy. How do you deal with that when a conversation changes? How do you deal with that? What's the challenges there?
Yeah, so what you describe is an amygdala hijack, right?
Okay.
That 0.07 second experience where something hit him the wrong way, and he got emotional about it.
Right.
So I often, when I'm in a professional situation, it's a little harder in a kind of personal situation, but in a professional situation, I often say, let's just take a deep breath. Let's just take a pause. Let's think about, like what just happened, what's bothering us, what is it that you're experiencing in the moment? What are you feeling in the moment? Let's kind of clear the air and then start over again, So I find taking a pause, like just even with your son, like saying, let's take a break for a couple of minutes and come back to this in a little while. Just that space gives our brains a little opportunity to calm down and feel safe again and reconnect.
Now, what are some of the tools that business leaders can take to have a more trusting conversation? I think that's one of the things that a lot of people feel like the company doesn't understand me, doesn't understand where I'm coming from. I'm wondering what kind of tools can a business owner, someone that's in their late 50s, 60s, bring to the table to work with possibly a millennial, just to have a more trusting conversation?
Yeah. So one of my favorite tools is having a discovery conversation. It's a conversation where it's a dialogue to unpack information. We're not going to make any decisions. We're not going to make, any choices about anything. We're just going to explore a particular situation. So
Learn more.
Okay. You're going to tell me what you know. I'm going to tell you what I know. We might even ask the question, what don't we know? What do we need to get more information about? And from that discovery conversation, then the business owner can step back, get perspective, think about what they learned in the conversation, and then figure out, okay, so what would it take for me to, now that I know what I now know, what would it take to move this conversation forward in a positive way? Or, think about different strategies for our business. So discovery conversation, is one tool.
Sounds like you're focusing on listening. That's a hard thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Are there any tools out there that you recommend where someone can learn how to listen better?
There are a number of books on the topic of listening. The practice of it is, that I can share now, is just to help a business owner be very present in a conversation and really focus on the person that they're talking to rather than thinking about the next thing that they're going to say.
Okay.
So it's really confirming with the person, here's what I heard you say. Did I hear you say that, accurately? Rather than coming up with, hey, you said this, so now I've got to say something else. So it's really being present, not worrying about the answers, and just really, really focusing on what you can learn from the person that you're being with. So I would say listening, actively listening. I watched a YouTube video not too long ago called compassionate listening, which is an even higher level of listening than active listening. And compassionate listening is all about listening for what the other person needs. So you're listening for what they need so that you can think about how you can be helpful around that particular thing. And it's really interesting when you listen for what a person needs, when you listen for that, what you can learn. Oftentimes what you can hear is that they feel insecure about something, or they lack the confidence about something, or they're really afraid or worried about something. And if it's something that you've already experienced, in your career as a business owner, you might be able to share a story at a time when you experienced something similar and how you got past that. So the other tool that's kind of wrapped up in that is learning how, as a business owner, to be vulnerable, which is to, say, I didn't always know I didn't always know everything. And sometimes if I share that with someone, that can create an opening in a conversation that didn't exist before.
It seems like regardless of how old you are, you can always learn something new. So you got to be open to learning if you're the leader.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of new dynamics going on in business that, you may not have caught, but someone younger might have caught it for you, or someone new may have known it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, there's a lot of people that are meeting facilitators. So how do you go about picking a meeting facilitator? How does someone pick you? The list is long of people that you've served, but what was the criteria? What would you think is the criteria to pick up the right meeting facilitator?
So I think that you want to look for someone who doesn't have an agenda or a conflict of interest in.
How do you mean? Their own agenda versus the business agenda?
Right.
Okay.
Their own agenda or a particular point of view about, the way a business should be, because they've spent years working in that business area. And so they've formed a lot of assumptions about the way something should go. I would say that you want to look for someone who you get a sense that they can listen objectively. Now, how do you know if someone can listen objectively? Well, you spend time talking with them, and you spend time understanding how they listen, what they listen to. If you're feeling a good connection with them, like they really were hearing what you were saying and they could really appreciate your perspective, then that's a person who may very well have the skill that you're looking for. You want to find someone who is comfortable having difficult conversations, who doesn't shy away when the conversation gets heated or when there's a lot of emotion in the conversation. So you want someone who's had a lot of training in processing difficult situations. I would ask, I would learn how much experience the person has working with different size groups. Facilitating very small groups is a lot. A small group could be 4 or 5 people. A large group could be 30 or 40 people. So just understanding how they have approached different kinds of meetings. And then the other thing is, can they come up with lots of ideas and options? When the business owner tells you, I've got this challenge or that challenge, can the potential meeting facilitator come up with lots of ideas about how they might approach that situation or approach a conversation around that situation? Having a lot of ideas is important because the first idea you come up with about, a way to work through a conversation may not appeal to the business owner. And because they're your partner in the conversation, a conversation takes 2 people. Right. So you have to feel like you have a real partnership with the person that you're working with to design the meeting. Mm-hmm. And you can get a sense of whether or not they could be a good partner for you if they have a lot of ideas.
So brain chemistry, understanding that with your employees is important. And I guess through the discovery process, you learn more about that from the owner anyway, his perception of what the brain chemistry is.
Well, you can actually see it at play, right? Like I can, when I'm sitting across the table from a business owner, I can actually see what's creating an amygdala hijack for them. Because I can be asking them about something in the discovery process, and that thing that frustrates the heck out of them or is really worrying them, it will take hold immediately. I mean, I've had business owners, people leading organizations, sometimes not owners, but when I work sometimes in the nonprofit sector, I've had leaders, both men and women, cry because the emotion can be, so overwhelming.
Change your body language, everything, huh?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah. And so one of the things, Eric, that I want to say about understanding brain chemistry is that I use that in designing meetings. So I actually think about how am I going to create a really safe and trusting space? And I look for tools and solutions to having conversations that do that. And when I do that, I'm thinking about how the brain chemistry that is going to show up in the meeting and how to use that to have positive conversations.
Well, we've talked about a lot, Denice. Is there anything that I'm missing that you could share with me in regards to your business specifically, or in regards to brain chemistry, or just meeting facilitation?
Yeah, I'll just say I love what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. And when someone calls me and says, I'd like to talk to you about facilitating a meeting, I feel a really positive excitement and energy like I did the first time the first meeting I facilitated. And so I really enjoy what I do. And I think that gives us we come into every conversation trusting and knowing that we can help a business be more successful. Time is money, and the business bottom line is really important. And if we can help a business solve a problem and stop worrying about something so that they can use their time in a much more productive way, then I feel like we've contributed to their bottom line.
Well, thanks for being with us, Denice. You can always get hold of me at area code 714-643-2500, and my extension is 420. Thanks for being with us, Denice.
Thanks for having me.